Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you as always for tuning back in. I wanted to add this introduction to let you know that I had split the videos. Initially, I thought I would have the tower included with the lily video that I posted a couple of weeks ago, but the videos are turning out to be long, so it's best that I split them and that I focus on one single mute card per video. So enjoy this tutorial. Okay, let's move on to the tower, and I'm going to go through the same approach here. Let's start with the red owl quote on the red owl card of the tower, which is number 19. And it says, "The tower is a sign in happy age you are growing, as long as near the clouds no storm is showing." So obviously this is written as a poem, always nice. And the idea of the tower suggesting old age is actually a traditional suggestion associated with the tower. This is the meaning that Titania associates with the tower, and this is also the meaning that I initially picked up because Titania's deck was the first deck I worked with, and I worked with it for a very long time, so it affected me and my approach to Lenormand until I started to do more research and reading into Lenormand and eventually build Lenormand Reader. But as you can see on the red owl quote, the main meaning that is captured here is that it has to do with old age and that sense of growing old happily and in security. It's just that if there are clouds nearby, or I would say other negative cards or challenging cards, it could compromise that a little bit. But in essence, the tower is about ripe old age and the sense of living long. So that is a very beautiful meaning of the card. Now, looking at the meaning in the tiny guidebook here, it says card number 19, the high tower. So that's another name that is used with the tower. It says, the card suggests that the questioner will have to live a ripe old age. However, if this card is surrounded by cards of bad omen, it suggests sickness may occur or under certain circumstances, eventually complete disability or death. Now, I think this is pretty dramatic and tragic and totally unnecessary, but it's really interesting how there is a focus on living long and health, which is not the typical meaning we associate with the tower today. Instead, many authors associate the tower with things that are official, administration, legal matters, the law, government, administration, and such suggestions are the main interpretation of the tower today. So let's go ahead and look at a couple of authors like we did with the lily, starting with Rana George. So Rana George suggests that she sees the tower as societal institutions and what falls under this umbrella. Big official entities, governments, corporations, conglomerations, anything with authority and a wide sphere of influence, judicial systems, the military, how interesting. And also there is that sense of the top, right? The idea of elevation. So looking from the top, reaching over a big area, guarding and protection. Obviously the light tower, the watchtower, and the lighthouse, all of these are associated with the tower. She also suggests the ego, ambition, confinement, imprisonment. These are lovely, and isolation. So it can be both challenging, either challenging or positive. It depends. It can also be guidance, protection, schools, law, higher education, hospitals. So any number of situations or places that have that level of authority. She also suggests that it signifies bureaucracy, hierarchy, obviously again that sense of elevation. And the tower is also your ambitions and your aspiration, as well as your high standards and all-around status. All of these are very beautiful ways to interpret the tower, and I think they make sense, like readily make sense. So you can see from just a few basic ideas, starting with that sense of authority and elevation, how many other suggestions you can get out of it. We've done this exercise through mind mapping in one of the workshops. If you're in the community, you would have access to the workshop, but the workshop is not for sale like the Astro Clock workshop. Not all of them will be, but it is in the community resources. So I think that it's easy to overcome the initial blockage that we have with the tower. The initial idea that it is mute and that we can't really make sense of it. So it's just a little bit of extrapolation from a few essential keywords, a few essential meanings, and we can get a lot. Let's move on to Caitlin Matthews and what Caitlin Matthews suggests the tower is about. She suggests the tower is anything that is official, ambitious, institutional, lofty, or tall. It is defined by the traditional, the bureaucratic, the administrative, the executive, or the ruling. It is guardian of the rule of law, the state, government, civilization, or town. So all the sizes. The ambition or motives of an institution, but I would say also of an individual, as Rana George suggested, also apply. Caitlin Matthews suggests near cards about a relationship, the tower can indicate a hardening of attitude or separation. I agree, but I think there is also the possibility of seeing it as longevity, or perhaps Caitlin Matthews suggests that the lily with relationships would point to longevity. She suggests it can reveal loneliness, especially when it appears to be to the right of someone. So these are some of the specific interpretations that some people make. And interestingly enough, Caitlin Matthews suggests this is not the same as the isolation of the mountain, which can be chosen or imposed. And the tower can be a little bit rigid, formal, traditional. I agree, there is something a bit cold that comes with the tower. It's not the warmest of cards. And some additional keywords here: institution, office, firm, business, buildings, institutional buildings, policy, conventions, tradition, law, all interesting keywords that we can extrapolate out of these essences that we associate with the tower. As people, it would be lawyers, someone official, legislatures, etc. So again, a very clear sense of what the tower is about. But notice that this is different from what we see in the Red Owl quote. For my part, I see the tower as both what Caitlin Matthews and Rana George were saying about this sense of official matters, administration, government, etc. But I also subscribe very much to the Red Owl suggestion of a sense of protection. And it's not too far off from the other suggestions, because there's that element of a watchtower, that element of protection and guidance through that elevated vantage point. I do think it brings that sense of protection. And also it is slower, it is tall, so it's long. So I think that element of time and protection and living long can also be associated with the tower. So I read it differently depending on context and also depending on combinations. So I think that it's possible to overcome initial blockages with the tower. It is not as mute as we might initially think. Let's go ahead and run through some combinations like I did with the lily and see what it looks like. So the lily and tower, I think this is long life, long term, possibly the lifetime. With the key, I think there is lots of success and breakthrough here. This can be a sense of promotion, of getting up there to that level. Certainly with the star, a strong sense of ambition here and achieving long range goals and also big goals. So very big cards, these two. And with the tree, there's also a sense of growth and evolution, another element of promotion, not necessarily on the job, but you know what I mean, that sense of stepping up and elevation. The road with the tower is also the long-term path or the path ahead. The clouds can be some complications, whether administrative or otherwise, and also it can bring in an element of isolation or stubbornness, not, that rigid aspect of the tower. I think it's better with the anchor, but it can work also with the tower. Now the bear with the tower is what I read as someone like a boss, a CEO, a president, a governor, because the bear is a boss card. So obviously with the tower, there is that office, the higher office. With the child, this can be a new path, a new chapter. With the scythe, there can be a breakaway from tradition, a breakaway from the standard process. And I forgot to mention earlier that I also see the tower sometimes as the past. Because of its association with time, it can be time into the future or time into the past. And so with a card like the scythe, it can be like a break from the past and turning the page. Certainly with the child in a triplet like this, it would very much suggest that. And actually with the road, which just came through, it can also point to letting go of the past and moving on. So you might like to also incorporate this idea into the tower. Now with the woman, this can be someone official. It could be someone in this office. It can also be someone older, more expert, more specialized, some kind of consultant. The idea of the woman and the man is that it gets its qualities from the tower and any other nearby card. With the rider, there can be some progress here. There can also be some things happening with these official matters. It could also be a messenger. It can be someone like an agent on behalf of the office. The rider brings that element of news. The dog, again, like with the lily and dog, there is that junior-senior contrast. So this can be someone who is looking to grow, to get promoted. It can also be a relationship between the senior and junior element. With the letter, we would definitely be looking at legal documents, administration, and the paperwork that goes with that. With the ship, there can be a new path ahead. It can also be progress. It can also be goal achievement, by the way. And it can also be moving on from the past. With the mouse, there can be some issues here. I think maybe issues of trust, that distance, that rigidity and coldness that comes with the tower. There can also be complications in terms of these administrative elements. With the heart, here I feel I would want more cards. If I had a challenging card, somewhat challenging card like the mouse, then maybe there can be that element of coldness that comes through. But if we had the ring or maybe another card, then I think that the idea of longevity and commitment and this sense of protection in a relationship can come through as well. Now the fox here can be a tricky element, but the fox is also good to represent people like agents and employees of certain the type of people who do work for you, like tellers, agents, real estate agents, and so on. So with the tower, it could be someone who works in one of these offices and you're working with this person for your affairs. But again, the fox can be a bit tricky. It can mean the need to be silent and cautious. And it's possible that you're privy to something in terms of what's inside the tower or that elite group. These are possible as well. But actually the fox is also about jobs, and the tower being associated with corporations and institutions, it can point to a job. The house and tower can be a place from the past, or it could be the house at the top. So that can depend as well. The cross can be important decisions. I also think assessments, evaluations, and decisions that are coming from the top. Now the mountain and tower is a special combination, and I inherit this combination from Titania's cards. She reads this combination as the deep past. I resonate with this. I think both are cold, far cards, so I think this works well. But it can also be some kind of obstacle where you don't have access to what's happening at the top, because the mountain is sometimes a blockage obstacle card. And it can also mean a place abroad or online, possibly, because I read the mountain as also referring to the online world. Now the fish is really good to suggest that the tower is a bank or some important financial institution. It can also be long-term investments. Definitely with the book, it would point to education and probably higher education, the idea of being knowledgeable and expert. The garden can be a meeting at the top here. It can also be a place from the past. The sun is really positive, so any way you look at the tower, depending on the context or the question, the sun is going to bring in some very positive results. The snake is very tricky. I would say this is definitely an element of secrecy and being privy to a more elite group, but there can also be some toxicity around here and maybe things going on behind the scenes. In terms of official matters, we could possibly suggest something not very honest happening. Good question. With the moon, I feel it's a bit like with the lily. There's a sense of unfolding and, the phases of life, transformations possibly in a deeper sense, and maybe an invitation and honors or maybe successful applications when we look at the tower as something formal. The coffin and tower, I think, is definitely the end of a phase or a time apart. The idea of isolation also comes well here. The anchor definitely suggests sticking with what we're doing and creating foundations for the long term. With the whip, a bit like with the scythe, there can be a break off from the past and some issues happening with the people at the top. In terms of admin, official matters, things can go not so well. Things can probably go to our disadvantage. With the man, it's like with the woman. With the clover, very positive, just like with any other card like the sun. Same with the flowers. Here, because the flowers is a card of renewal, I feel that the idea of going back to something from the past can be highlighted, and it's not really captured by other cards, so it's a good idea to dedicate it to this combination. With the bird, there can be a bit of an anxious situation here, a bit of nervousness, but also conversations. You might need to raise it to the top. You know how you escalate matters sometimes to the management. That can happen here. And with the stork, there can be changes and restructurings. And I think this comes through really well in terms of how they restructure companies, layoffs, changes. This can happen with these cards. But also more generally, the idea of change and, changing things a little bit, because like we said, the tower is a little bit rigid, but the stork is a lot more fluid. So it's a good idea here to change our ways a little bit, to think a little bit outside the box. So again, as you can see, it can be pretty straightforward. The tower does not have to be a mute card, neither does the lily. Again, spending a bit of time, maybe reading a little bit like we did, looking at maybe the more traditional interpretations just as like a starting point into how authors have taken the meanings and evolved them. Look at your favorite authors, jot down some keywords and do a mind map, and then do combinations, and you will have had plenty of exposure to the card, and I'm pretty sure after that point it won't be mute anymore. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on the lily and the tower. In part 2, we are going to do the 3 other mute cards that were part of the top 5, and these are going to be the tree, moon, and mountain. In the meantime, leave me your thoughts, your comments. Feel free to throw in a reading or a layout with these cards in them that you weren't sure how to interpret. We can always look at them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to doing part 2 with you. Until then, take very good care of yourself.